based upon the personality of the manager. So I ended up from about 6 years old, and for ever since following Nottingham Forest.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really good.
Great team.
Yeah.
Been agonizing the last 15, 20 years, but when I was a kid, man, they were winning everything in sight and beating all the big boys. It was fun.
It's true. I always like to ask people who are actually from the country, just because I know that Americans have no business really claiming any of the teams in the Premiership, but whatever. It happens.
Well, it's nice to have a dog in the hunt, isn't it? So
yeah.
Makes it nice to have a team to get depressed about.
I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. My 2 trophies can't hear you.
Who is your EPL team?
I'm one of those rubbish City fans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But in my defense, that was just before we started winning everything.
That sounds like everyone's defense, though.
It is, but like I actually can back it up by my litany of very weirdly timed and ordered City kits. In that I had a Mario Balotelli the year that we won the first title, and then immediately the next year went, that Stefan Jovetic guy, he's going to do big things.
There you go. As long as you've got the...
Followed by an Alvaro Negredo, actually. I bought like weird second-string strikers only because I really thought they were going to sell Aguero for no apparent reason at every turn. But,
damn.
I know. Anyway, I don't really want to delay anymore, so we'll just get into it.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the USL show sponsored by Roughneck Scarves, your home for national team, USL, and MLS scarves, as well as custom scarves for your club or personal use. Check them out, roughneckscarves.com. This podcast is also produced by the Beautiful Game Network of Podcasts, which we are very proud to be a part of. We're also very happy that Mike Sparks is back. Definitely check the whole network out at bgn.fm, as well as on the Twitters at the BGNFM. I am Evan Villela, in case you forgot, after a little hiatus for the World Cup. Joined sometimes by my soccer colleagues, sometimes by my soccer acquaintances, but they are always my soccer friends. For the next hour or so, I'll be your moderator, host, or maybe even your facilitator of a discussion of the year ahead for, just kidding, of the month that was, basically, for the United Soccer League. Joining me this week, it's my ragtag group of friends, which is awesome. Let me find you guys. First, he is... the best source of alternative music in USL media coverage, and the king of goths, or maybe the king of scene kids, depending on what day you catch him on. For Unused Substitutes, it's Dan. Hey, Dan.
Hello. That's quite the intro. Now the pressure's on.
It is. But I wouldn't have put it on you if I didn't think you would live up to it. So here you are. Secondly, he only travels in flocks. He is softer than a down pillow. He is, in fact, the Bernie Sanders of USL. It's Goose.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. It's been a while.
Any excuse I can get to call anyone the Bernie Sanders of anything is really something I'm going to take.
I now know why I'm here. I now know why I'm here. It's good.
Yeah. I was sitting on that one in the Google Doc, and I'm like, I need to say it again. And then joining us for the first time, he totally didn't know that this was going to happen, so I'm sure this has been a wonderful surprise. Probably not. In fact, I don't even know if he's still on the call. Anyway, it's your favorite expatriate. He moved out of those faulty towers in Downton Abbey to Colorado. He is the highest man in USL when it comes to elevation. It's the founder of the Backchat Show. He's also a writer for Last Word on Soccer about the Colorado Springs Switchbacks. He is also an author of Seasonal Disorder, which you should go buy. It's Mark Turner.
Hey, gents. Thank you so much. That's a very nice introduction. Maybe I'll come back.
Brilliant. All right. Guys, I'm going to be honest. We here at the USL show have not recorded in a bit. It's been a minute, as the kids would say. And some things have happened in the league. So I figured we'll talk about them. And I guess we'll just start, right before the World Cup happened, Spain went and fired their manager, and everyone was very up in arms about it. And, well, we saw how it went for them. But the USL has decided to follow suit with a couple of big names in the coaching, roster that we had leaving. Obviously, the most recent one being James O'Connor leaving Louisville City back to his former club in Orlando City, as well as his main assistant, Daniel Bird. But also, Lee Cowshaw decides that 19 years is enough. Thank you very much. And moves on from Richmond. So I guess opening thoughts on either of those two guys or just kind of that whole idea of a coach leaving midway through the season in general would be great.
It creates an interesting dynamic because Louisville's been good this year. They've kind of picked up the pace from where they were last year. Richmond, maybe not so much, but it kind of surprised me with Richmond because they haven't looked like they've disappointed this year, I wouldn't think. But maybe it was about time for that change to happen regardless. But I'm not necessarily a huge fan of changes in the middle of the season, especially with the situation. I guess it was kind of forced upon them with Louisville having a three-headed monster player coach, which they definitely stole from Tampa Bay. They did it first. But yeah, it's going to create an interesting last half of the season, I suppose, for both those teams, really.
I agree. I mean, you can't really blame O'Connor too much taking a step up to MLS, but you never want to lose your coach mid-season. As speaking as a Rowdies fan, who our best defender is now our manager, and we have Joe Cole as a player assistant coach. It's interesting. I think in our case it was needed. I think in Louisville City, it's interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. I mean, they're sitting 4th place currently. I don't know how that's going to go, how those 3 players can step up to keep the form going. It'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Sure.
I don't know how Joe Cole can be a manager of anything. In England, we still consider him to be a teenage phenom. So he's the English equivalent of Freddie Adu. He's forever a teenager.
So he's going to show up in Las Vegas next year?
Oh no!
Let's not wish that upon him.
Okay.
It begs an interesting question. I think we can all agree that the USL, by and large, is a developmental league. There are certainly older, more mature, been around the block a few times guys in the league, but generally speaking, it's a developmental league. And so no one really tends to bat an eyelid when players move from team to team, particularly if the player perceives that as being an upward move. And usually that means moving from an unaffiliated team to some team that has a connection to an MLS organization. Is the same attitude not to be applied to the coaches? Do we not feel like the majority of the coaches in the USL, they themselves developing their skills to maybe move on to something bigger and better?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to take from this. And it kind of reminded me, not to plug my team too much, we miss you, Enzo, but his move from the Independents at the beginning of the year to the Rapids is only really seen as a positive, I would think. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind with O'Connor. I think we've all kind of seen that as the next move for him to the MLS or to a higher level because he's earned that respect and he's earned it with his play for Louisville, or coaching, I should say. But I think that's, as a fan, I think that's what you want to see from the league, and you want to see from your coaches, your players, and things like that, I would think.
Yeah, it's interesting because we are in a little bit. It's a weird spot, and that I don't think we're necessarily, to use a bit of an example, like in an England scenario where you have the same kind of 5 coaches popping up to replace other coaches every year. In the, you look at guys, even Toronto FC2's previous coach, Jason Bent, is now with the first team as an assistant. So, he moved upward in that program. And obviously, it's been, there's a lot of good young coaching talent in USL right now. Alan Coach obviously comes to mind. I'll be biased and say I think Brendan Burke does a phenomenal job. John Wolniak does a great job. There's really not a manager that you look at in the league and you go, well, they're clearly just not on the same level as everybody else. And I do think that this is the perfect proving ground for managers. But then at the same time in USL, you also have guys like, and not to discredit the 6th place team in the Eastern Conference, but Mike Anhauser, who's been in Charleston forever. And, Lee Calshaw was with Richmond forever and finally stepped down. And Bob Lilly obviously has been an institution in lower level American soccer for as long as it's been around. In Pittsburgh right now are, for my money, the best team in the Eastern Conference. So yeah, it's interesting, but I do think that, I've seen a couple of people locally in Louisville, not people that I'm familiar with personally, but be like, oh, this was a terrible move and he shouldn't have done it. And I think a lot of us that have been on the show and that follow the league closely were like, yeah, no, this is great because he's the first real coach to go up from USL to MLS, and we all think that he's going to do very well because that's the kind of guy that he is. So yeah, really weird time to move, but if he didn't take that, he wouldn't have gotten the job probably. So I mean, and he beat out an established MLS guy in Caleb Porter. So that's a couple big things there where I'm like, yeah, it's a really good narrative that the USL can start to use for sure. And that was my timer, I think.
Okay, I was wondering what that was.
No, I have no idea.
I'm really, really glad to hear
that was my phone. That was sorry about that. It happened to be
no, that was whenever I get too long-winded, someone cuts me off. That exact alarm. It's great.
Yeah, but I think it's ultimately a positive for the league. It's a little weird to see that happen mid-season. I'm hoping it's not a situation for his sake that it's going to be a half a season, I guess, audition, and then him go back, take a step back, or that type of thing. Because even though I wouldn't call myself a Louisville fan by any stretch, I would like to see him do well, regardless, because it's good for the league. It's good exposure, and like I said, he's definitely earned it. I mean, he's taken an expansion team in Louisville in 2015, and I want to say competed in the playoffs that first year, and he's always done well. So hats off to him and best of luck.
I'm just a little worried about where he went. Orlando City isn't exactly the shining beacon of nice and patience and anything over there. Fans can turn on him in a second if results don't change quickly.
True.
So he's got to come in and make almost a near instant impact. And, I'm rooting for him because I want to see the, guys take that step up and succeed. But I also hate Orlando City. But I hope he does well. And I hope Orlando City has the patience with him that, a new coach taking that step up mid-season especially should be offered.
They're sounding more and more like England all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And and then just that influx of player coaches, which is the one thing that I think is troubling for me if I'm sitting in Louisville, Kentucky right now, is that kind of shows that they either were really confident that both coaches weren't going to go, which I could understand, and that they were going to make Dan Bird just kind of the interim or what have you. But the fact that they don't have a short list apparently or aren't as far along hiring or replacement coach process as I would have expected them to be, or maybe a team that has a sought after coach would have been is a bit confusing. And I mean, Dan, not to take barbs at you guys the whole episode, but we've seen how a team with player coaches gets on in the first couple games, and it's not looking great. So we'll see.
I mean, in Neil Collins' defense, we've lost almost everybody.
It's very true. Yeah, there's that other guy that left to be a technical director at a very big German club, or whatever that means. So yeah, I mean, it's not his fault for sure.
I mean, injuries, our best player leaving, our best defender in Neil Collins being our coach. It's suspensions. Joe Cole got, the yellow. It's just been nuts.
Sure.
But I mean, yes, you're right. It's not usually an optimal situation.
Yeah, but it's super confusing to me how it's going to work having 3 interim coaches, because from my perspective, unless something has changed, Louisville does not tend to keep a very deep roster to begin with.
No.
So I don't know if it's going to be It's going to be really weird when one of those players. I'm really curious how that's going to work as far as who's going to be the coach, because there has to be an acting coach. Someone has to wear a suit, I would assume, or whatever they prefer stylistically.
Sure.
But it's also interesting because there's 2 midfielders, if I'm not mistaken, and a striker.
Yeah.
I don't remember them being very deep at striker. So I don't know.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Also, to be fair, Nashville did kind of set the tone with player coaches, and that Matt Pickens is one, as well as one of their defenders. So
it's a very Rowdy's thing, you know. We're just spreading it around the league at this point.
For sure.
With all the manager musical chairs that we're seeing,
sure,
and the recent development we saw with Lopetegui as well, the Spain coach being fired right before the World Cup tournament, it got me to thinking just how vital managers are, or maybe are not. And I'm wondering how many USL teams, were they to lose their manager tonight, would struggle. How many would maintain the position they have in the league? How many, in fact, might thrive from that managerial change? That's another thing to be considered. It's not always a bad thing when managers depart.
Are we replacing the managers, or are we just going like full-on manager apocalypse? There's no managers anymore.
I think we give all the fans in the stands cards that they get to hold up. Yeah, they're color-coded. It relates to specific actions within the game, changes in formation.
So basically, we're turning FIFA 8, the USL into like a weird FIFA 18 football manager mod kind of thing.
Championship manager, full-blown. Let's go.
Okay, great. I think to actually honestly answer your question, as absurd as it is, if all of the USL or the MLS2 sides lost their manager, might be bad. And I know Toronto FC2 don't play with a manager now, but it also kind of feels like Toronto FC2 don't play with a team right now. So, whatever you want to make out of that. But yeah, no, I think there is a lot of teams that if you took the manager away, and I just think in general that's not a great idea, which is
Pittsburgh would
obviously
be,
why we're not enacting it. But
Pittsburgh would be screwed without their manager.
No, they would just score a lot more.
We'd be in trouble. It would be utter chaos. If we lost Mike Jeffries in a similar fashion, he was called up or he was lost or something. I don't know.
He just got lost.
Yeah, his plane got derailed or something.
For sure. Amnesia.
It would not be good. It would be more chaos than it is right now.
I'm sitting here wondering what having a manager is like.
You're welcome to ours.
Yeah. I kid. Neil Collins actually is a good idea, but I would say our previous manager, it was, from what I hear towards the end especially, it was kind of like not even having a manager.
Well, then we'll just ask your guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, moving on, I know there's been a lot of games played by this point. We're about halfway through. I suppose, and Mark, I guess I'll start with you, our Western Conference aficionado. No pressure. Anyone out there that's surprised you in terms of how well they're doing, or conversely, anyone out there that surprised you in terms of how poorly things are going?
No one's really surprised me in terms of how well they're doing. If I look at the top 4 teams in the league right now, Real Monarchs, Phoenix Rising, Sacramento Rep, and Swope Park, I would have expected those 4 teams to have occupied the 5 spaces, the top 5 spaces in some combination. So the fact they're 1, 2, 3, 4 does not surprise me. And there are no real surprises then in the remaining spots as they stand presently, other than the fact that the switchbacks are clinging to number 8 by their fingernails. The only surprise I've really had this season, and I'm going to, in the interest of just purging here, I'm going to embarrass myself publicly and remind people that the last time I was on this show, and perhaps this is why this was the last time I was on this show, was preseason when I said that I thought OKC were going to win the league. I felt like they and the Real Monarchs would be scrapping it out at the top of the table. OKC picked up some great players in the offseason, not least of all Christian Ibiaga, who I think is one of the best defenders in the USL. And so to see them down in 13th place right now, struggling like heck, does surprise me.
Did they at least pay you well to say that?
Well, the roster looked good. The roster looked good last season, and they appeared only to add strength to it. So, again, I really expected them to be pushing the Monarchs. I suppose I'm a little surprised by Phoenix, because Phoenix flattered to deceive. And so to see them actually putting together a string of results, they haven't lost now, I think, in 6 or 7 games, and to occupy that second spot is a little surprising, particularly given that Didier Drogba, the most he seems to be contributing to the team right now is driving by and waving at people in the stadium as he passes.
Now, hold on. He's tweeting about a really cool goal. Come on.
You know, he's actually doing a fantastic job for the World Cup announcement team.
Good on him. I will say, I think the other surprise, or at least one that I didn't see coming in the slightest, was Portland being in 7th right now. They haven't looked great recently.
I wouldn't have seen that before a ball was kicked, but then they picked up my boy Josh Phillips, and Josh is the definition of a warrior. And it does not surprise me to see him blossom with the captain's armband and to raise all ships. I think he's done a really great job, particularly defensively, of bolstering that club and putting them on a strong foundation. So, yes, to see them in 7th is a little surprising, but to see them doing better than we expected should surprise no one when you have Josh Phillips on your roster.
And then, gentlemen, and you know, Mark, if you have opinions, feel free. Eastern Conference side of things, who are we surprised by being where they are? Who are we not surprised by being where they are? I suppose no one's really batting an eye at Cincy being where they are. Although with Pittsburgh and Nashville both on 15 games, that's going to be an interesting game of catch-up, so to speak. And then, as it usually is, the Eastern Conference is just a logjam right now. And honestly, that goes all the way down from basically 13 up. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could be buying for that 5th playoff spot even right now with, Indy on 25 points and Ottawa on 18 and 13th. So, whoever wants to chime in. Dan, I'm sure you have opinions on that team in 11th right now.
Yeah, I did not see us out of the playoff picture at this point in the season.
Or at any point in the season, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I figured we'd be, battling top 4 for most of the season because the Eastern Conference is a bit crazy, but trying to try to steady the ship is getting kind of frustrating. But we've made some moves, Poku coming in, so hopefully we can balance that back out and get to where we need to be. Like you just said, it is a logjam, and a win on Wednesday against Toronto FC here in St. Pete puts us right back in the thick of it. If we win, that should put us probably in that 9th spot with a game in hand on the Red Bulls too. So I'm not too worried yet, but we need Neil Collins to, finally put his imprint on this club and get us firing on all cylinders again. But I think pretty much otherwise, the table's close to where I would expect the Eastern Conference to be. I expected Cincinnati, maybe Pittsburgh. I didn't expect to be that close to the, battling only 6 points behind with 2 games in hand on Cincinnati. I didn't see that one. But it's pretty much everybody is where I would expect them to be.
Yeah. It's I would agree that it kind of feels like maybe probably the top 6, I would think right now, are maybe going to stay the same. It's really hard to tell because there's been a ton of changes here and there. Cincinnati's more than likely, I would think, gonna take the top spot. Honestly, at this point with my team, just to briefly talk about it, because I've already talked about them a lot tonight. But I think our ceiling is pretty well set at 5 to 6. But really, the one thing I've noticed, the major team that I think has been surprising as heck to me, being stopwatch FC is what I've termed them as. Penn FC has had a pretty good run of form recently. And it hasn't been against, I mean, they beat Toronto FC 3-2, Kickers 2-1. Not necessarily surprising there, but they still beat opponents they should have beat. They tied in Louisville 3-3.
Yep.
That surprised the hell out of me. Sorry, Dan. They did beat the Rowdies 2-1. And on top of it, I'm forgetting his last name, but their striker, Lucky, I want to say has had a really good run of form here recently. Scoring goals. And they even tied with Indy in Indy.
And they led that game forever. And they really should have gotten 3 points out of it, but they didn't, which is unfortunate. But
it should be less surprising. I mean, I guess because I've known Voss has coached or was an assistant coach down here for a few years, and in Fort Lauderdale before that.
Yeah,
and I'm not too shocked by Penn FC coming around. He's he was able to do things even as an assistant coach in Fort Lauderdale on a budget, keeps them defensively organized and whatnot. And he did the same when he came here. So I'm not too shocked by Penn FC's form. And there's a couple. Tommy Heineman's there. Lucky Kasana is also a former Rowdy from the NASL days. He was always fun to watch. So I guess I'm not too surprised by Penn FC doing their thing. I think they had a rockier than they should have, but that was Voss just getting his feet wet.
Yeah, that's a good point that I honestly forgot about, that they did have a good pedigree of coach in there. So I honestly think considering their recent run of form, if they can continue that, they could look to battle for that 8th or 7th playoff spot potentially. I mean, it's still really early on is the other thing. There's still a ton of things that could happen. 3 more coaches will probably lose their job at this point per average. But I did notice that Evan is put a bug in my ear to briefly rant about the announcers.
I just wanted to do this. So, and Goose, the good news is you were not the only person to talk to me about this regarding the Bethlehem game, but I do think it is a problem in general because I did some math. The math that I did. And I'm assuming that all of us would take a job being a play-by-play announcer for the league, pretty much solely doing one team, or we'll call it 2 teams or whatever, for like $35,000 a year or so. Or you can find people that would do it for that. Hi, Jacob Birds. I would do it for that. Now, what that works out to be is if you're paying someone about $35,000 a year and your club expansion fee is $1 million on the dot, that's 28 people. It's not unreasonable to think about maybe happening and doing that, because this is not a personal thing against any of the people that do it right now. And Mike Watts is a friend of the show, or he was until tonight. I don't know. And he's a wonderful person and he does a great job, but there is not 20 Mike Watts. No. And there, and a lot of those people don't just do USL things. But the lack of research that is done, or the lack of preparation that's done to get these people to know something about the teams that they cover week in, week out, is baffling to me.
Yeah. It's
especially because you just switched over to ESPN Plus, where you might have people watching the Charlotte Independents or the Richmond Kickers or North Carolina or insert team name here for the first time.
Yeah, it's bothersome to me because it's a reoccurring thing where they tend to, and I get it, it's not an easy job. I would probably fall flat on my face doing it, even for the team that I follow a lot. But like you said, if there's a person that's maybe on the fringe of following the USL or maybe even in the city of a team and they don't know very much about this team, they go to watch a game and the announcer maybe has not very strong facts or facts that are negative.
Or they're talking about another team in the league in the run of play. Like,
it's distracting, and it
is.
I like I said, I would probably never be able to do it without a lot more research than I would be able to do. But it's very difficult to watch, and it's bothersome when there's multiple issues just not knowing a playing style of a team or a certain playing style of a player. And I don't know. I hate ranting about it too much because I've basically turned into a masochist listening to them at this point, and I'm picking my poison, I suppose. But yeah, it's a reoccurring thing, and I'd much rather see them promote the team that's winning than be so negative about a team that's losing. But that may just be me. I don't know.
Losing our minds.
Let's see, what was the last game I watched? The Rowdies' last game. I already forgot who we played. Yeah, it was bad. I think I spent my entire time during the game on Twitter complaining about the announcers there.
Ironically, it was Charlotte.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking that may have been it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long week, but
Fair enough.
I don't know. I usually am pretty harsh on the announcers, but it's the games I've watched on ESPN Plus, and I've watched a couple of home games. Even our announcers aren't. Well, that was actually, I think, before ESPN Plus. It hasn't been a pleasant experience.
I think it's definitely something that needs to be revamped.
Yes.
And it almost, I don't want to say that it feels like there's not as much structure as it needs to be there, but it kind of comes across as that. Where you have, it would benefit everyone if the announcer felt more, because I would love a biased announcer that is going to completely know everything about the home team and maybe not so much about the away team. But when they don't seem to know too much about either team, or like you kind of said, Evan, they're talking about the Rowdies in the Charlotte Steel game, it doesn't really have much relevance.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway. I always feel like when we talk about this, people are going to be like, "Oh, well, you're only saying that," and no one's ever said this, but whatever. People are going to be like, "Well, you're only saying that because like you think that you can do it better, or because you do a podcast about the league and or whatever, and like that people listen to it." And it's like, yeah, but at the same time, like we're not going on about how the USL is one of the most prominent Division II leagues in the world, and really, for as well as they've done in ramping up legitimacy and credibility in terms of stats and availability of Jake Edwards, even like, which is a little thing, or just trying to implement rules about media availability and things like that, for them to get something so fundamental to trying to grow your league as commentators that can help new people at least have a general understanding of what's going on if they know nothing about soccer or nothing about USL is very strange.
I think we test that theory and do an old school Nottingham Forest Rowdies friendly. Bring this back to this.
Yep, like it. Absolutely. Let's go for it. I'm remaining very quiet here because
you don't want you're still a sane man and like to tread lightly.
Well, no, I said earlier about having a dog in the fight regarding the other topic, and
sure,
to some degree, I have a dog in the fight in this one,
sure.
But I also happen to be in a market where we have a phenomenal commentary team, or at least one of the individuals in the team. The other member of the team seems to fluctuate, but in Roland Vargish, who I think has been on this show a couple of times, we have one of the most knowledgeable commentators, I think, in the game in the United States. So to have him in the Colorado Springs market, we're very, very fortunate. That said, I've been very lucky in that the Switchbacks allowed myself and my Backchat teammate Jason Smith to commentate on the Switchbacks Open Cup game last season, and I guess we didn't do too terrible of a job in that we got invited back to do it again this year, and I really enjoyed the experience. It certainly gives you an appreciation for the work that Roland and whoever's working with him do. But I do agree with the central premise that you guys have crafted here, in that nobody is necessarily expecting you to be an expert on both teams any given weekend, or get the pronunciations correct of players' names on the visiting team. In fact, as fans, I think we actually kind of like that. I think we like to scream and shout at our TV when somebody says, "Oh, now Luke Versaloni has the ball."
Right.
Yeah, we kind of get a kick out of that, but at least be an expert on what's going on at home, and that's not too hard to do. You know, that requires you going 2 or 3 games. It requires you spending a little time with the coaches and the players. The one thing I will give USL props for is their marketing team is on fire. I mean, their website, you can find, between that and soccerway.com, you can find pretty much any information you want on the league in terms of stats and player backgrounds and everything else. So, you know, at least know what's going on in your own backyard. That to me seems a minimum.
Yeah, fair enough.
I agree with that.
Yep.
And Dan, I don't. What's going on, man?
What?
I don't like. I just. Sorry, I'm looking at the Eastern Conference table, and I see you guys are in 11th, and I'm very, you know, concerned for you, for Matt, for everybody. It's just upsetting. Although I suppose the last bit of news that we should talk about, and then we'll move on to some other things and some shout outs I want to give to a couple people, and we can talk about that. But Toronto FC2 lost to the Charleston Battery. I believe that was yesterday, the 1st of July.
Yeah.
Final score, Toronto FC 2-0, Charleston Battery 4. And it almost felt like it was during the game. One of the, this is a very cute way to say it, founding members of Division 3 for USL next year, which, you know, they have 16, they have 3 points. So this is not surprising, but the discussion I want to have off of this is, how do we feel about the MLS 2 sides next year? What do we want to do with them?
Oh, I've seen some takes about this, and I have some feel. I think there needs to be, I don't know, because the league winners outside of
USL 2.5.
Yeah, there's, you know, the Red Bulls 2. Granted, they have 0 fans, but they're one of the best.
I respect them as an organization. Does that count? That doesn't count.
But right, like they're one of the best teams, and you know, and you look at the Western Conference where you know, there's a bunch of the MLS 2 sides that are pretty.
Oh, look at that! Real Monarchs, #1.
Yeah. So it's difficult because I think it takes out some competition. And I like the youth in there that they bring after watching NASL for the first few years of doing this podcast and following the Rowdies. It was very slow, grinding, and boring, and USL is definitely that at times, but mostly not because of the youth and everything. So I don't like watching a game where there's 7 people in the stands, but I also appreciate what the 2 teams bring. So I'm still very much torn on this subject.
Yeah, I think
if you don't like watching games with 7 people in the stands, you could never be a Derby County fan. I'm just saying that in case any of my Forest peeps are listening.
No, funny thing is, side note there, I have a Forest jersey hanging up in my closet.
Good. The plot thickens.
But here's the thing. There's a really big, like, a constant listener fan of my podcast who's a Derby County fan, and he's been constantly, like, coming at me to be a Derby County fan, and I'm trying to declare neutrality, but it's hard.
Yeah, don't do it. They're very fond of sheep. So let me clarify. Are we talking here about? Are we asking what is the future of 2 teams, MLS 2 teams, or is this a segue into what does D3 mean? because right now the two teams
Yeah.
are some of the stronger teams in the conferences, right? So to me, it would
Correct.
make sense to have the
Right.
two teams play D3, but how can you have them play D3 when they're some of the stronger teams in what is now D2?
Right. Well, and so the one thing that I bring up, just because I've been entrenched with a MLS 2, I call them 1.5s because it's a different market and a different team name. The first thing they said when USL moved up from Division 3 to Division 2 was, wow, the quality of play here got a lot better. We like that a lot. That's going to help player development. Can you convince all those teams that going down with other two teams? And we've seen how varied those can be. We have ones where it's, a bunch of kids in their 18s to 24 with, one or two veterans in the mix. Bethlehem comes to mind. Red Bull do a very good job of interspersing guys that have MLS experience and things like that. And then we have ones like Toronto FC too, or even, Ottawa are Montreal's affiliate, and they do a good job of bringing in guys, and Real Monarchs obviously do a great job. And so there's a huge gap in what being a two-side means right now. And yeah, the other thing that I said regarding USL as it is currently is the last, 2 out of your 3 champions were two sides.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing, and I think I said this to you, Goose, was we're so far away from knowing what USL Division 3 is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
In that, if it's a bunch of like fringy USL players, kind of like how there's, good guys getting minutes in USL right now that were fringy MLS guys, or even, like Carl Ouimet comes to mind. Dane Kelly is another one that was, and I guess is technically now a USL guy. If it's like fringy USL guys and then like the best that NPSL has to offer, that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But if it's just a bunch of MLS 2 sides, it's going to look like academy. It'll basically be like a weird extension of U23 teams. And that's fine and dandy, but I don't know if USL D3 wants to be that, is the problem.
Well, let me lay this on you. So
please,
we talk a lot about the USL being the largest second division in the world, but it's really hard to keep a straight face when you start attaching names like credible and prestigious to division.
Right.
It just is for right now, right?
Sure,
that's my position, and I know I'm a snotty Englishman, and I'm sure there are plenty of listeners right now going, "Oh, English guy telling us how to run our game here in the US." But look at it this way:
pour all the USLT over the boat and put it in the USL River or whatever.
But look at it this way: whether it's the Premier League, or whether it's Serie A, or whether it's Bundesliga. Those are the top tier of professional soccers in their respective football, within their respective countries, right? Just as the MLS is here. And the second divisions in those respective leagues, again, whether it's a championship, Serie B, whatever it might be, the players that play there are doing one or two things. They're either trying to play well enough to get picked up by a tier 1 team, or they're trying to help their team get to that top division. Teams in the third division, those players that's very much developmental. They're learning their craft in most cases. They're either on the way up or on the way out. So the structure you have here with the USL is going to be interesting, because if general wisdom is top tier is MLS, second tier are those standalone teams that are trying to really build their franchise, really trying to develop into something legitimate and long-term, like the Rowdies, for instance. And the third tier really should be developmental. That surely should be where the MLS 2 teams sit. But part of the reason that most of those kids are playing MLS 2 is because what? They want to play for the MLS, right? They want to play for their mother team. And so what player is going to want to step down to Division 3 when they're looking for the quickest route to Division 1? And would players in that situation be prepared to leave the MLS 2 team and move to a Division 2 team, be that Phoenix Rising, be it Orange County, whoever it might be, to continue their learning and progression, kind of like it happens everywhere else in the world? Because if they're not going to, it's going to create this really interesting kind of fragmented structure whereby the players who are in D3 right now, they're looking to make the jump to D1. D2 is completely not of interest to them.
Yeah.
It's tough because then you throw the PDL into that discussion, which they're very, very much so developmental in
Yes,
getting more reps and things like that, which I'm only recently learning about. You probably know a decent more about that, Evan, but you throw that into the mix, then where does that fall into the spectrum of developmental or where it's – I think a lot has to be determined of what – I think right now if you put New York Red Bull 2, the roster they're going to have essentially in D2 next year in D3, they're going to completely steamroll everybody.
yes.
I think you could even somewhat, I'm not going to say this on the record, I'm not going to say Toronto's going to be great in D3, but you see if Cavaluso, if Jordan Hamilton, is it Hamilton,
Yep.
the guy that,
Yeah.
you put them in D3, they're automatically going to be leaps and bounds above them, but it's a really tough dynamic. I think it has to be situational. I can see eventually once D3 is settled into what they're going to be as far as talent level goes and what pool they're going to draw from talent-wise, it would make sense to put the two teams there as far as a competition standpoint goes. But I think it's really early to say, and it wouldn't make sense for the New York Red Bull 2 to go to D3 right now, or even the Steel, honestly.
Because or Real Monarchs.
Or exactly, yeah.
Swope Park, or like Portland Timbers 2 even, or, Orange County is LAFC's affiliate, like I think it's a really hard sell for those organizations. I really do. And at another point, how ridiculous would it be to see a bunch of MLS guys and yeah, okay, they're MLS quote unquote rejects because they're MLS contracted guys that aren't getting minutes with an MLS team. But like for the amount of vitriol and the amount of, we beat these, MLS guys that happens now, like how dumb is it going to look when there's a bunch of MLS guys playing in Division 3 against, Georgia Tormenta, who, again, nothing against them. Wonderful folks. They run a great team. They're going to have a good D3 team. There's no doubt about that. But Goose, like you said, that's the only thing I can think of when I see that get kicked around is that league's going to be nigh unwatchable because it's going to feel like the Cosmos at the tail end of NASL.
Yeah, it's really tough because then you even look at it from a standpoint of the expansion teams that are going to be there by default, a la Greenville Pro Soccer. They're going to automatically be they're going to be a step below them, just staying on the standpoint of they're going to be an expansion team. I would honestly be surprised if there's 2 or 3 more 2 teams that are involved with D3. I don't think it's going to be a lot of expansion teams necessarily, but there's so much that has to be determined at this point, where who knows? I mean, it's tough to say what that talent level is going to be. So to say that I would prefer the 2 teams maybe not to be in the tier 2 down the road, but even I would say maybe 2-ish years from now, it doesn't make much sense to do that. And if I was in the Red Bulls position, I wouldn't want to do it. It doesn't make any sense. Right. They're not going to get as much development like we've kind of talked about. Against different talent like that, they're not going to develop as much as you want them to. So, yeah.
What I think maybe if you drop them all the 2 teams to say the Division 3, you can take your standouts and loan them to a Rowdies or independent clubs in Division 2. I think you would see probably a lot more use of the loan in that case to develop your top talent in the Division 3 before you bring them up to MLS. So I mean, there's options to do that because not everybody's going to be Division 2 or Division 3 caliber in the youth squad anyway. So I think you might be able to loan the players out to get them the experience they need.
The only problem with that is that if you loan them, you lose the ability to have them train with your first team or even your second team.
That depends on the relationship.
It does depend on your setup. It's true. Yeah. But a lot of those,
the Rapids have that going on.
For a lot of those, that's fair. For a lot of those out and out 2 teams, though, they like that a lot. like a lot. And it's understandable because it's you get total control over the player. Anyway, yeah, Mark, any thoughts on that one? I know you're kind of the odd man out with the switchbacks, but I mean, you've seen that relationship before. Hi, New York City.
Yeah, no, other than just to say that with the switchbacks and the Rapids, obviously we have players that come play for us and then go train with the Rapids.
Mhm.
The Rapids still see more of those players than we do, despite the fact that they're supposedly on our roster. But no,
Right.
beyond that, I think it's just an interesting conversation. And it's an interesting
It
time
is.
in US professional
Yeah.
soccer right now. So a good time to be alive, guys.
Yeah, what a time indeed. What a time indeed.
Yeah.
And then I don't. Oh man, the only other thing I want to talk about, and it's only because Mark threw it in the chat. There's been some strange officiating. I was going to say
Nobody agrees. Move
yeah,
on.
yeah. All right,
Minority.
fine. Everyone's a stand for pro. I get it. And not even just this year, but in the 3 years I've been covering the league now, which is weird because I'm not old. Officiating. Again, other than being a little more generous with things, how. And this is a topic and a half too. How does it get better? How does it improve? Does pro need to be more pro? That's I don't want to make the pun, but I have to. Do they have to be more proactive in giving the league better refs or better resources, or being a little more attentive to how bad some of these officials are? Or what's the
Just get rid of pro.
Yeah.
Start your own in-house officiating and have full control over it.
what would the USL referee? Because it would have to be like a tie into something they do now.
I don't know, but I hate.
They'd make the breakdown about like the worst refereeing decisions every week, and he would just talk about those.
Bill Edwards has a history of making officiating mixtapes. We'll just let him be in charge of it.
Oh,
what was it against the game against the? It was a match against the Cosmos that Bill Edwards felt we got screwed, so he literally had the team release like a compilation of bad calls against the Rowdies from Pro when we were in NASL.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, I'll try to find it and I'll tweet it to you.
Very cool.
Does the USL need our own version of the Mike Petke hand those out Trey?
Yes, please.
Rant.
Yes, please.
Do we need someone to simultaneously like bemoan the use of a fax machine as well as bemoan the refereeing? Is that a thing?
We need
I just
something.
don't know where to start. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's another thing that needs to be addressed because it's obviously an issue. How you address that and how you fix that is well above my pay grade. Yeah, but the other thing to keep in mind, I think, is there's bad calls or subjective calls everywhere, no matter what league. So I don't know. It's definitely not good, but I don't know. It's a tough discussion.
It's bad. The officiating is terrible.
It's just inconsistent, I think, is my.
That's the biggest thing. It's definitely inconsistent, which inconsistency shows a problem, obviously. But I could never be a ref because I have terrible vision. So
I think, going to tie in the two previous conversations, a Division 3 to help Pro get some of these guys that don't have center ref experience, some experience down there will be great, because I really don't like a meaningful game and then checking who the referee is and seeing they don't have any like experience.
Yep.
And the game going to crap because the ref is just lost or out of their depth. And so I think maybe, Division 3 will help that at least, hopefully, maybe.
No, that's a good point to bring up, is automatically more games at a higher level will raise the level, you would think. I mean, practice tends to make perfect, I suppose. Or so they say. I mean, or they'll just continually have more practice of being bad. and they'll quit being referee, maybe. But yeah.
So is it a case of inconsistency truly, or is it lack of accountability, or is it compensation?
So,
or is it some combination of these things that needs to improve?
I think it's more of a and sure, compensation is. People are always going to take their job a little more seriously when they're being paid more to do it, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
However, and what I just kind of brainstormed a little bit was, what if, because MLS puts out, well, I guess Pro puts it out, but for MLS, I'm not really terribly sure how that works. But, there's that list of, here's the things that our referees are going to try to hone in because we view them as a problem in the league.
Mm.
And I think one of them for MLS this year was diving in the box or something, or related to penalties, right? I haven't seen anything like that from USL, and I don't even mean if your trailing leg comes through a guy or something, that needs to be a harsher discipline foul. But even just if Pro would release we're going to try to make it so that players can't mob officials after a foul, or we're going to try to make it so that persistent infringement is called more consistently. Because that's one that I point to that I've seen where it's okay, that guy's on his third foul, that's a card, and it's not, and sometimes it is. So I think more like public accountability, because I'm sure there is accountability in Pro, because that would be a nightmare if there wasn't, and I hope that there is. I don't actually know. But maybe more communication with USL itself, or more communication, letting USL kind of broadcast that stuff and put it out there and saying, hey, here's disciplinary reports, because I don't know if you guys have ever tried to get an answer out of a pool reporter, but I've honestly had, I've tried to do it once, but the experience was so bad that I just never tried it again, and nothing's ever happened as bad. But, it was after... Dan, honest to God, it might have been that Rowdies game last year that got delayed for like 90 minutes and then they played.
Yeah.
But I forget. But I asked a question about a penalty or something in the box, and we went, to where the referees were, and they said, well, we don't do any media requests for pools. Like, they just flat out denied it. And like things like that, little, just for that to be more consistent. And Mark, I'm answering your question in a very roundabout way, but I think it's accountability.
Yeah. I think transparency would go a long way too, because
that's not going to happen.
If they have certain things they're going to own on and try to fix, it'll make a more standardized, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, this is what is going to be a foul, this is what's not going to be a foul. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it helps the fans, it helps the players, it helps everything. Where we're not sitting here complaining about a call that was called this way this week and that way that week. Peace of mind is a nice thing, I would think. Maybe we're asking too much. I don't know, because we're so used to some transparency and availability with the USL.
Sure.
But I think if that's kind of the way the league has been, if they can do it, I think it would be better for everybody. But maybe that's a perfect world scenario. I don't know.
That's something fans the world over have been asking for, for as long as I can remember.
Sure.
Why can't referees come out at the end of the game in a post-match interview, kind of the same way they do with the coaches and the players, and maybe field a predetermined number of questions? Maybe it's 3 questions. Hey, I want to ask you about these 3 moments in the game. Why did you go in that direction? And in fact, general wisdom suggests that most referees would like that opportunity. Most referees aren't going to sheepishly divert the question. Instead, they're going to say, okay, look, whether I got it wrong or I got it right, here was my thought process. This is what I saw.
Yep.
Because, we keep saying they're only human, and we recognize they're only human. So we can take culpability. That's okay. But it would be nice to have that transparency. It's never going to happen.
Maybe have a conversation for 2 people currently talking on this podcast. It would be very cool if instead of, because I think part of the reason why we haven't seen that like pool reporter predetermined questions things is because those guys aren't paid to talk to media. You know what I mean? Like there's no on that, and they never get trained to do that. So I think there's a lot of anxiety and nerves maybe where they go, all right, well, if I say here's what I saw, then is someone which we totally would, but that's beside the point. Really enjoy is the way the disciplinary committee, like the suspension videos, you know what I'm talking about? Where they'll go, hey, this guy got suspended for 3 games, and they'll run the tape back from the hit or whatever that they deemed a violation, and they'll say, well, he put his elbow on this guy's jaw here, and that's this rule, and that's why we thought it was a suspension. So like something like that for American soccer referees in general, because I know it's not at all a glamorous profession, but something where they get to be in charge of their narrative, and that's the end of it, would be interesting at the very least, I think.
Yeah. So basically what we're all saying is we need a rating system for the referees. Like an Audi player.
I need a Nicholas Murray email every Monday for USL Referee of the Week.
Yes. Referee Team of the Week, Lions fourth referee.
But it's still 11 people.
we just need to bring in VAR, guys. That will cure everything.
Yes.
Oh,
Mark
no.
Geiger, come here. I need it.
No.
All right.
Yep.
Oh man, we figured it out. All right, so Nick, if you're listening, if you're watching, you can't watch. Well, you can. Too deep now. Too deep. Nick, if you're listening, just give me a call. We'll set up the USL referee of the week. Or I guess would it have to be the pro referees of the week? Shit, that'd be difficult. Yeah. And like this, whoever did the Cincinnati game and like made them win, quote unquote, would win every week because that's how voting goes in this league.
Yeah.
Hey man, you scored the goal of the year by any loss to Cincinnati sucks. Sorry. Yeah, I'm still mad about that. Anyway.
Yep.
Mark, you're new here. Where can people interact with you on Twitter and things?
Well, assuming they'd want to after the last hour.
That's what I say every week. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a couple of places on Twitter just to keep it nice and confusing. And it depends what you like to read. If you like to hear somebody ranting and raving and being a typical football fan, then by all means follow me on my personal account, which is @Melchett, which is MELCHETT. If you like someone's views to be a little bit more fenced in and a little more reasonable, then my, in inverted commas, work Twitter is Last Word on Soccer, which is @LWOS_COS for Colorado Springs.
It's brilliant.
I think I'm funnier on the Melch. Well, I might not be funnier, but I'm certainly saltier.
My rebuttal to if people don't want a quote unquote like normal football fan who has opinions and things is they just listen to the wrong podcast for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Because
I want to say very quickly, because I want to give a shout out to my colleagues as well. Backchat has a Twitter account, Backchat Show. So if anyone's interested in reading about things, all things switchbacks, that would be a good place to go.
Fellow network friends, Backchat. How about that?
Sorry?
Your fellow BGN network friends.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. All of you are, in fact. Picking between my two favorite 30-plus-year-old children. Goose, just because it's in the order of the way you're showing up in my... Anyway. Goose, where can people go out and find you and things?
My odd Twitter handle is the Soccer Goose. You can also listen to me rant / sadcast every once in a while on when I say every once in a while, I mean like 2 times a week roughly on Talkin' Jacks, and that is without a G, but it's Talkin' Jacks. We talk about excuse me, the Independence, the Charlotte Independence specifically. I do that with Alex Warren, great guy there. And if for some reason you want to hear me talk about the South Atlantic of the PDL and the Carolina teams, you can do that on SNST Amateur Hour. That's a Twitter handle there. Yeah, that's about all I do. That's only the things I do. Yeah. Up to you, Dan.
You can follow me personally on Twitter at unsub_Dan. We can listen to the show I co-host, The Unused Substitutes. We do usually a show every Wednesday. The website is theunsubs.com, and you can follow the podcast Twitter at, that's a good question. I think it's Unused Subs Pod. Unused Subs Pod on Twitter. I have to check that. I'm not the one in charge of that Twitter account.
All right.
And,
Dan, you should be.
I think I turn enough people away from the rowdies on my personal
But Dan,
account.
you should be.
I don't.
What else do you have to lose? You're in 11th right now. Dan, go for it.
I mean, I don't want to.
I'm sure someone will keep that receipt on that comment when we finish. Below you on the table, it'll be great.
It's okay. I'll pull that audio.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm sure Mike's making a mental note of it right now. And then, I guess and this is always a fun part for me because I'm always so confused as to how people find the show if they don't follow us on Twitter or I suppose are a part of our patreon.com/the USL show, Hey, well, but I'll just get into it. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, interact with us on the Twitter, as far as the USL show is concerned, which is myself and a ton of other people in spirit, but really only 3 or 4 of us actually, at the USL show is where you can do that because unlike Dan, our podcast Twitter makes sense.
Ours makes sense. I just forget. I'm a terrible host.
You can also find us on the interwebs. The USL or USLshow.com will take you straight to us there. You can find really cool things like our Patreon, like I said, patreon.com/the USL show, as well as my dear friends over at Soccer Loco, where if you decided you wanted to buy a Spain kit and just put LOL on the back of it, there you go. You can do it. And say hi to DK while you're there. Me personally, and all of you stole my shtick, but I'll say it too. If for whatever reason you want to hear more or interact with me or see more of me, because there's at least one picture of me. On my Twitter, it's at Villella, which is my last name, V as in Victor, ILLELLA BSFC. That's right, like the team that I cover. And you can find me periodically writing things on at Brotherly Game, which is the Philadelphia Union SB Nation affiliate site. Other than that, guys, I very much appreciate having you on and for being able to bother you for the last hour or so to get opinions about a soccer league that we all enjoy. I know it doesn't sound like we enjoy it, but we do. It gives us something to do. So until then, everyone, take care, and we'll talk to you soon in some capacity for sure. Brilliant, guys. I appreciate it.